Welcome everybody to the Path to Ownership Part 2. I hope you were here for Part 1. If not, don't worry. We also have 2 more series coming up, and they're going to be in September and November. And Ashley, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I had to do some quick math in my head there.
I think you're right.
Perfect. I am Dr. Amber Howarth. I'm a veterinarian and I work for Blue Heron Consulting as an operational coach, but more specifically in the startup and acquisition department, meaning that I help clients who come to us who are building their practices from the ground up, or they have just a couple of things that they need help with before they open. Sometimes it's an acquisition, so the building's already in existence, but we have people come to us in all stages wanting help with the process. And we're going to go through pros and cons and some of that tonight. I am also an investor in a startup in Arizona, which is really fun and really amazing to be a part of that. And I will kick it over to Ashley, and then we'll dive into our key insights for today.
Thank you, Amber. Yeah, my name's Ashley Moore. I am a veterinary loan officer with First Financial Bank. So I specialize in just vet and pet care. So those clients of Amber's that are looking to do a startup or an acquisition, or when you're ready for an expansion, we're here to help make sure you get the financing that you need to make your dream happen. So really excited to be here with you guys today and to get started.
And before I hit the arrow to go into the key insights, if everybody's able to take a moment, close your eyes for a second and imagine what your ideal practice would look like. Maybe you're not sure what ownership looks like for you, or if you even want to own. So what would your ideal job look like instead of practice? I have some objectives for everybody today, but I am curious, what does everybody want to get out of today's talk? So if you are able to put that in the chat, that would be fantastic. So that way I can make sure to hit not only my objectives, but what you are wanting to get to. Great, so more knowledge at an unfamiliar field. All right, as of right now, 1 objective. So I had better be able to at least hit 1. It looks like 1 more came in, how to start preparing to start a practice. And that's a really great one. So I will make sure to hit both of those as we go through this. And again, if you have questions or anything like that, drop them in the chat. Ashley will be watching out for those, so that way we can answer them as we go. And then we will also have time at the very end. So startups versus acquisitions, how do you know which one's right for you? We're going to be discovering that today. We're going to be doing a lot of pros and a lot of cons. And again, keep that chat function open because I will have some questions coming for you. We're more specifically going to break down acquisitions into buy-ins and buyouts. And again, go over those pros and cons of each. We're also going to look at how to target potential acquisitions in your area and what are some strategies in order to do that. Ashley is going to discuss the SBA guaranteed loan programs quite in depth and identify different stages of the lending process. And last but not least, she is going to describe what the bank really wants to see in its loan applications. There are many different paths to practice ownership. A lot of people think that success is a straight linear line, and it is not. It's actually a really crazy squiggle line, to be honest. And same with ownership. There are, as you guys saw, I just listed out a couple of different pathways that you can take. So no matter which one you take, it will lead to something unique and something that's going to be crafted just for you and what you're wanting to get out of it. So we've got startups, associate buy-ins, and buyouts. And these 3 pictures that you see on the screen are PDFs that AHA has up on its website available for purchase. I highly recommend reading these. They will give you a lot of insight into whichever one you are wanting to go for. And maybe you're not sure, they do have a bundle on there as well where you can get all three. Let's dive into starting a veterinary practice. We first up always have our pros. So if you guys can open up your chat function again, what are some pros of starting your own practice? We've got a couple coming in. You can build the clinic culture you want right off the bat. Perfect. That is one of my pros I'm going to be talking about. Build it how you want. It's another one, and set it up your way and not having to deal with the other policies, staff, etc. You guys hit the nail on the head. So my first one for you is you get to pick where you want to put your practice. It's completely up to you. It's not already an existing building. You get to go out into your community and find that perfect spot. Sometimes doing a startup is less than buying an existing practice. And there's a couple of reasons why that is, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later. So I'm going to save that point and highlight it in the slides further down. As someone already said, you get to build it from the ground up. You get to customize it. You get to put whatever equipment you want in there, the floor plan, the fixtures, absolutely everything. And so for some people like me, I would absolutely love that. I love picking out that stuff. I have other clients that do not like that and want an architect's help, but we are here to help you along through that process, whichever route you decide to go. And then lastly, you control your own destiny. And what I mean by that is you get to pick out your culture, and from day one, you get to have, let's say, that family feel, if that's something that you're really going for. You get to mold your staff to do exactly what you are wanting and how you want to practice medicine. And it's not someone else in charge, the corporate in charge, whoever it is. And you ultimately get to build everything from the ground up, like I said before, and pick out absolutely everything. So we're going to go through some cons. Sometimes building can be expensive. I don't know if anybody watches the lumber prices here, but the lumber prices do fluctuate with the economy and they go up and down constantly. And so sometimes it can be pretty expensive. Here at Blue Heron Consulting, we do financial projections to make sure that everything, all of your costs are actually going to be able to cash flow once the business is built and up and running, and that all of those expenses that you had on the upfront are going to be included, and that you will have a profitable business in the end. Sometimes you also get construction delays. I also do want to make a point about that because, again, the success is not a linear line. It's a very squiggle line. Same with starting your own practice or even acquiring your own practice. There's highs, there's lows, and it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster on these ups and downs. You have no initial income. If you're acquiring a practice, usually that practice, and especially in today's economy, has appointments booked out for weeks. With your startup, that's not necessarily always the case. You do want to try to get appointments on the book, but it's not like you're already up, running, and established. And again, you can control your own destiny. Sometimes you need that extra little bit of help, which is why it's on the cons, but that's why Blue Heron Consulting is here, and Ashley is also here to guide you guys in the right direction. We're going to move on to buying a veterinary practice and buying it outright from the owner. If you guys are able to open up that chat function again, what would be some buyout pros? So someone said less time, H&R initially, so that's definitely one. Already staffed and safe income, quotation marks around the safe. Knowing the pluses and minuses before going in, protocols already in place. Those are all really great. My first one that I have for you here is you have many financing options available. There's a history that clinic has probably a couple-year history of being open, operating, that you can look back on, that the bank can look back on and make sure that it's a safe investment for you. You also want the investment to pay for itself, right? And no matter what you do, you always want it to pay for itself. And that's one thing that you have to look at when you're buying a clinic, to make sure that it is going to cash flow at the end of the day. And when I say cash flow, I mean that you have money left over after absolutely everything has been paid. I thought this was funny to put up here, the little Monopoly. You're going to collect the 200 as you pass go. You have an instant income, as I talked about earlier. You usually have clients already on the books for weeks and weeks in advance. And so when you do take over the clinic, you probably already have a schedule that you're going to be following. And then you also have the autonomy. Nobody else is there to tell you what to do. You don't have to follow certain protocols that the older owner or whoever you bought it from had in place. You were able to have that autonomy to choose how you want to run your business. Some of our cons, it can be a large investment upfront. And as I hinted at and alluded at, we're still going to be covering this a little bit later too, but you have this thing called goodwill in practices, and your goodwill is your clients, how well trained your staff are, and how the two of these come together and their ability to make cash flow and bring money and income above the expenses of the clinic. And I'll go into that a little bit deeper in one of the coming slides. So hang with me there for a second. You have full responsibility of the clinic. It's going to be all on you all day, every day, because there isn't another owner. And you usually have about 10% of your clients who are really unhappy with the transition of ownership, that they're usually going to leave or they're going to go to other clinics and they're just not going to be happy. That is normal. That is fine. That happens in every single acquisition I've been a part of, and just something that happens during the process. We have associate buy-ins now. Again, what do you guys think would be some buy-in pros? Comment in the chat now. Minimal investment, relatively, yep, depending on how much ownership you're getting. Gradual increase in management responsibilities. Less responsibility, better learning curve. Those are really great points. So our buy-in pros, there's less risk involved because you usually are buying in at first, maybe as a minority owner, and you have other people, other minds in the room to think, to collaborate with about different situations that arise. The investment, again, should always pay for itself. And because you are potentially buying in maybe a minority piece, or maybe you are buying a bigger piece, but it'll still be up and running already, and there won't be any lag time of when you put your investment in and of appointments walking through the door. And you might even gain management experience or better support with everybody who's already invested or already there and in the practice. Some of our cons for buy-ins, sometimes it can be a really slow process. And sometimes you can still not be in charge if you're a minority owner. And this actually happened to one of my clients recently, is that she had wanted to buy into a practice and was promised on the upfront that she was going to be. And when that year came around of this buy-in opportunity, the owner of the clinic said, "Oh, I think in 2 years." And then in 2 years' time, it still didn't happen. And the current owner said, "Oh, I think now in 3 years." And so that's why I have the golden handcuff picture up here of sometimes you're just chasing and chasing and it seems like a really good deal and they keep promising this and that, but it just never happens. So watch out for that in practices. And we have goodwill. And we're going to talk about valuations just briefly as they pertain to this a little bit, but I will not go into that in depth because I am not a veterinary evaluator by any means. So for valuations, they are essentially putting a price on a practice past the tangible items. Of course, you're going to count things like your real estate, your inventory, and your equipment. And you also want to account for that famous word that I keep bringing up, that goodwill of how well trained your staff are, the clientele. Are they a good clientele? Are they coming in? Are they willing and able to follow your recommendations and have that compliance needed in order to generate that cash flow? And my last point here, always have a professional veterinary evaluator do your valuation. Make sure that they are in the veterinary industry. I just had another client recently who was trying to buy into a clinic, and the clinic got a valuation done from a third-party evaluator who knows nothing about veterinary medicine, and it was a little bit of a mess. We're going to talk about some of the different types of ways that you can be an owner in veterinary hospitals to also add the pieces to the puzzle to figure out which way would be the best way for you to go. So you have a solo owner, and solo owners really like the independence. They really like being by themselves because it's all on them all day, every day. And they really like getting that financial reward at the end of the day for all of their hard work. And so that's what the ROI means. ROI is return on investment. Next, you have partnership. And so partners usually have that shared responsibility. They've got that shared financial risk. And hopefully, when you partner with someone else, you complement each other's strengths. And so, if you're really good at one thing and your partner's not, hopefully that plays out in a really great way. Sometimes, though, this can cause strife with the shared decision-making if you are not agreeing on something. If you guys have spouses or significant others, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. And business is business, so don't let any emotions get in the way. And then the third one is you have investors like I am. And so you have limited responsibility. You have a shared financial risk because you're usually going in with a group of people, not always, but usually. And then you also have the financial reward, the ROI. Some of the downsides of that are the limited input and the limited control that I have. So you just have to really think about which one fits best for you and think about the different pros and cons. If you decide to partner, there's a couple of things that I would caution you on. You want to make sure that the ownership splits. One person and the ownership is 51% or higher, and the second person is 49% or lower. And the reason why I say that is because I have had and heard a lot of horror stories of owners that are 50-50 and everything goes really great for the first couple years or so. And then they get to a point where they get into a stalemate and they can't decide anything. And they need someone to come in as a third party just to help them out of this situation. You also want to have a buy-sell agreement, and that is exactly what it says. How do you buy? How do you sell? How do you get out of it if you guys can't agree on something? And that this is something that a lawyer should draft up too. You also want to have an operating agreement. How is the day-to-day business going to be run? What do you guys both agree on? And your employee agreements. Who's going to be doing what for the practice? Are you both going to be taking a management role? Is one of you going to be doing that? Are you going to work 3 days a week? Are you only going to work 1 day a week? How does that look like for you and your partner? So I want to take this from the dream to reality. And our first step in this is determining your vision, goals, and your practice philosophy. And really taking that vision, which is your really long-winded version, your story, everything that you can put down on paper, and you take that and put it into about 6 words, kind of like a really, really short tweet from Twitter, and basically make it a tagline. So that way your employees can remember it, your clients can remember it. It can be somewhere on the wall that you live by, that you strive to be. And when it gets busy in the clinic, you can stop for a second and say, are we honoring this mission statement? Are we honoring what we want to accomplish here today? You want to use your network to identify potential acquisitions or startup opportunities in your area. For example, you can send out letters to already existing practices in your area to see if any of them are interested in maybe a buy-in or a buyout, partnering, whatever that looks like for you, just getting the conversation started. You want to establish a relationship with a lender like Ashley. And then you also want to create a business plan and a budget. And like I mentioned before, something that we do here at Blue Heron Consulting is help you create a business plan and financial projections. And the financial projections, a little background on that, it's years 1 through 3. And then we also have a loan information tab, but just projecting out all of the costs of doing veterinary medicine and what the ROI every single month is going to look like for you, and what net income is going to look like in the future for your practice. So they're a lot of fun, at least for me. That's one of my favorite parts of the process, but that is something that we do here at Blue Heron. So I'm going to kick it over to Ashley, and she's going to get started in the SBA loan process.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Yeah, so when we're talking about SBA loans, a lot of times people come to us, especially for startups or acquisitions. And one common misconception when it comes to the SBA loans is that the money comes directly from the government. That's actually not the case. The money is lent from the banks, and the SBA sets the guidelines. So what happens is if that bank follows all of the rules, it gets the backing of the SBA, so they guarantee a portion of that loan. And what that does for you as the borrower is it allows you to come with a startup, or, you know, if you might not meet the set guidelines for a conventional product, you can qualify for an SBA loan. So one cool thing, though, is that the SBA partners with lenders. And there's some that are preferred lenders, like First Financial Bank. And we're able to underwrite all in-house and pretty much the SBA gives us the authority to give the stamp of approval for an SBA loan. So with the SBA products, it's commercial loans, and it's set up with specific stipulations that we have to follow. But if we do, then, you know, it makes it a little bit easier for you to obtain funding for a business that you might not be able to elsewhere. All right, so when we're talking about SBA loans, obviously they are made to small businesses. And to qualify as a small business, you have to meet the SBA size standards. So they look at businesses across the entire country and look at that, you know, number of employees, average annual receipts, and everything is categorized by a specific classification code. So you can see there the North American Industry Classification System. And for veterinary services, they're given their own code, and each one of these codes has an income attached to it. So to be considered a small business by SBA standards, that means that you can't have gross revenues totaling over $8 million. So a lot of times when you're looking at, even a multi-doctor practice, you're not going to be, kind of size out of that small business. All right, so this is the loan process. And a lot of times people think, if you look at the back half of this, that phase 6 through phase 8, where you're actually receiving the approval for financing, that's where people think it takes the longest, but that's not actually the case. A lot of times that takes 60, sometimes a little bit more, 75 or so days from when you actually receive approval for financing through the end of closing the deal. In that time frame, we're doing things kind of like what Amber discussed, business valuations, real estate appraisals, to make sure that you're getting what you pay for, essentially. But really, what takes the most time is that phase 1 through phase 6. So actually finding the right practice for you, getting a letter of intent, negotiating the deal, actually getting through that entire process is what really is the most time consuming, because you want to make sure that you're going for the right deal and finding if you'd rather do a startup or an acquisition, or really finding where you fit in that, in the arena. So, yeah, once we get through that process, it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to get through to closing and getting you into your practice. All right, so we're going to go over some of the different financial statements that we need in order to move forward with the loan. So we're going to look at balance sheets, income statements, and statements of cash flows, and kind of dig into what each of these mean and how they impact your loan opportunities in your business. So the balance sheet really is a snapshot of the company's financial position. So what it does is it displays both the company's assets and the liabilities to give you what your equity is at the end of the day. All right, so assets are divided into 2 separate groups. So first you have your fixed assets. So those are things that you would keep long-term: real estate, improvements, anything kind of fixed to the ground, large equipment. Those types of things are what would be considered fixed assets. So current assets are things, think of it as things, you use throughout the year, inventory, cash, accounts receivables, those types of things that could fluctuate or that you would use up on an annual basis. So one thing I did want to point out when it comes to your balance sheet, though, in assets, that goodwill that Dr. Amber was discussing, that can go in your long-term assets on your balance sheet. So you do get credit for that when it comes to the overall value and looking at your assets versus your liabilities. So liabilities essentially are your debts, right? So current liabilities are things that you would have to pay within the next year. So those are things such as credit cards or your rent or just different bills and things like that that would come due within the next year, or those revolving debts essentially. The long-term liabilities, those are things like your SBA loan, or really the way to describe it as things that would be due in greater than a year. If we're looking at a personal financial statement, not necessarily business, student loans are a long-term liability, but really this is your bank notes, any long-term leases on equipment, practice vehicles, those types of things could be on there. So really, at the end of the day, when you're looking at the balance sheet, what you want to get to is your ownership equity. How much of that business do you own? And how you get that is taking all of those assets minus your liabilities. So what this does from a business valuation standpoint or from the bank standpoint is really see what that business is worth at the end of the day. So if an investor is looking at it, that can give them, the info that they need to decide if they want to invest. And I'm sure Dr. Amber can speak to that she probably dug into a couple balance sheets when she was looking to invest. You can develop more effective strategies of how, where money is going, where it's coming from, and how, you're utilizing your resources. But it really helps to just, like I said, just at the end of the day, give you a ratio of assets to liabilities to give you your equity. So income statements. So income statements give you pretty much what's coming in to the business as well as what your expenses are. So you can do it from two different methods, accrual or cash basis. So accrual focuses on the anticipated revenues and expenses. So things that are upcoming and things such as that. Cash is more immediate. So it is, what have you brought in the past month versus what went out in the past month. It'll show you more in real time what's going on with your income versus your expenses. So it's, an overall record of the business activities of the organization. So these income statements, I've seen them on a monthly basis. A lot of times we like to see them on an annual basis. And that gives us a good idea of what that net income is at the end of the day. So net income is just the revenues minus those expenses. So this is also known as, commonly referred to as a P&L or a profit and loss statement. So your profits go on one part, your losses or your expenses go on another. And at the end of the day, you can figure out what your net income is. So the purpose of an income statement, it shows your financial performance, whether that is over a month or a year or whatever the case may be. You can really see how well your business is doing, and it gives you a good idea of, where your money is coming from again, but also where your money is going. So you can really dig deep into it and see, am I spending too much on, salaries, or am I spending too much on equipment, whatever the case is, or inventory, am I holding too much? It gives you a good financial picture of, what that business looks like at any given time. So when we're breaking down those income statements, there are a couple of different pieces. So the income, so that is just, off of your goods and services, what is coming into the business. Cost of goods. So this is, I don't know how many people are familiar with COGS on here right now, but this is, things that don't appear on your expense line items, like inventory and that type of thing, but are a cost of doing business essentially. Once you take your income minus your cost of goods, that gives you your gross profit margin. And from that, you would take all of your additional expenses. So your rents, even, things like depreciation, all of that. That comes from your profit margin to give you your operating income. And from there, you get your net profit. Anything you wanted to add with that, Amber?
I think that was a really good breakdown of COGS.
Okay.
Pretty high overview without too far into it. So
yeah, just a basic understanding, because there's so much that goes into these income statements when you look at them. But really, if you can kind of compartmentalize it and put it in different buckets, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So here's just an example of what an income statement can look like. So if you look at the revenues at the top, it has a breakdown of what type of revenue is coming in, so you can kind of see what is making up the most of the business, right? And then when you look at the cost of goods, you can see, again, the breakdown of the percentages. Okay, what is our main expense here? So prescription sales, for example, in this example. And then when you look at salaries, rent, it really provides a really good breakdown of where all of these expenses are coming from. And what you can do with that is take it and put it against something like one of those AHA books, or take it to Blue Heron, and they can tell you, if you're in line with industry standards or where, your areas of opportunity are. So something like this really gives a good financial picture of, where you're excelling or where there might be areas of opportunity. And that comes into when you're acquiring in a business as well. So you can, even when it comes to your business plan, help to develop your business plan from these financial statements. All right, so the statement of cash flows, this one is probably the least understood of the three statements, and usually the one that people, it's the hardest to find, I think, from people, but this one summarizes the amount of cash and cash equivalents entering and leaving the company. So again, it's similar to an income statement, but it really just measures that end of the day true inflows and outflows. So for example, when you're looking at something like a depreciation expense, yes, that is taken out of your overall cash flow, but that's not really, it's not hard money. It's not a tangible, actual thing that has been being taken out of your business. That cash is still there. That's why when we do, valuations and things, and there's certain things that you can add back because it's not actually taking money from that business. So this uses the information from your income statement and balance sheet to create your overall cash flow statement. So what this does is make sure, it tells you what cash you have on hand. So it makes adjustments to the information recorded on your income statement so you actually know your net cash flow. How liquid are you? It shows you changes in those assets and those liabilities. So say, you're paying off your credit cards, but, you have those credit card charges were against something that was a hard tangible asset. It'll show you all of that and get to that equity at the end of the day. So you can actually use this to project those future cash flows and give you a good idea of where that business is going to be. So, with this, it's important when you're looking to acquire or buy in or whatever the case is, really get these good financial statements so you can predict what cash flow you can expect, and then also kind of see again where those areas of opportunity and those strengths are. So here is an example of operating cash flow, and this one comes from Amazon. So, and this one right here is comparing 2019 to 2020. So it actually gives you an idea of what is changing and by how much. So in this example, you can see that the income has increased pretty significantly. But you also can see, the changes in those operating expenses as well. So, the ratio of the percent to total, like for example, the inventories, the income went up, but the inventory went down. So you can really dig into these line items and see, what is making a difference in the business. So when are these financials the most critical? So definitely when you're looking to grow and expand. Once you're actually into that practice and you've been in there for a few years and you see that there's a ton of opportunity, it's critical, especially from the bank's perspective, that we can see, that good financial picture and what is working for you. And for you as the business owner and looking at that business plan, you want to know that you're set up for success when you're looking to grow. So when, if you're struggling and don't have your finances in order, that probably isn't the best time to be looking at, growth and expansion. So definitely making sure that you know your numbers and where, and you're set up to take over additional responsibility and you have a plan in place. When you're looking to sell, absolutely. So I know that, I tell this story all the time, but I mean, I've had some customers who have gotten really, really good deals because sellers didn't get a business valuation and didn't know their financials. And that's, I mean, on the flip side, you could get shortchanged horribly. You might think that your practice is worth $1 million, but when at the end of the day, there's so many expenses that weren't accounted for that it's worth 100,000 as opposed to $1 million. So you definitely, when it comes to selling, want to make sure that at least for several years before, at least 3, if not more years before you really are digging into those finances and getting them in, all the ducks in a row.
That's why you should definitely use a veterinary evaluator for
Yes.
selling or buying any hospital. It definitely helps out, and you can, as Ashley said, lose out big time if you do not know what you're looking at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So another important time, obviously, is buying. So we tell every single person who is looking to buy a practice, never, ever accept poor or outdated financials. And with that, if they're not willing to give them to you, or they don't have, as I mentioned before, all their ducks in a row, that can be a red flag for you as a buyer, because that's setting you up for surprises, and us as the bank, we don't like surprises. So definitely from a buying standpoint, you want to have that veterinary evaluator do a business valuation as well, and make sure that you're getting a fair price and buying something that is going to give you a return on your investment. And again, we want you to see the potential in those practices. We don't want you to pay for it. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting a fair price there. And then also with this, initiating a new service. So whenever you are looking to bring something new into your clinic, you want to make sure that you have, the feasibility to be able to bring it on, and it's not going to stretch you too thin. So whether that be the staffing, whether that be the additional cash flow of purchasing new equipment, or whether, that just be your time, you really need to be able to measure that return on your investment versus, kind of where you are right now, to make sure that you're, feasibly bringing on something that's going to further your ROI and your practice.
And with being prepared to, with all of these financial statements, that goes back to having an exit plan. And anytime you get into business, you really, really need to make sure that you have an exit plan. We hear from a lot of owners that do not have one. And for example, I worked with a clinic, and he had a brain injury a couple of years back and is slowly losing his function to talk. No one else in his family is a veterinarian. And so, you're leaving your business to your loved ones who may or may not be in the veterinary industry and may or may not want your business at the end of the day. We've also had other examples too, where the person who is the veterinarian passed away unexpectedly. And so different things arise up in life. So just always make sure that you have an exit strategy and your ducks in a row, like Ashley was saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when it comes to, buying and selling, it really, these financial statements are the basis of it. But I want to kind of touch on too is, when you're looking to buy, or especially a startup, having your personal financial ducks in a row, just like we talked about the income statements here, knowing what your personal assets versus liabilities are and all of those things. And I think we talked about it in the last webinar, but just to kind of touch on the importance of that too, and being prepared when it comes time for those purchases, making sure you know where your personal financials stand as well. And then when it comes to a startup, really knowing that data to support those projections. So that's where something, again, where a Blue Heron would come in, somebody like Dr. Amber, who can sit with you and say, okay, look, this is, can really work on those pieces of the business plan that will play into those projections. Because when you don't have those 3 years of these financial documents that we just talked about, you're going to need those 3 years of projections to show that you can pay that loan. So, and also just to show your return on your investment, because you want to make sure that eventually, you want to get paid too. So, when it comes to financial statements, in lieu of those, if you want to go the startup route, you really want to make sure that you're digging into those projections and making sure that, one, they're realistic and feasible, and two, that they're fair, essentially.
Yes, we definitely make sure that you guys pay yourself when we do our startup projections. That is a must.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys. That is it. That's all we have for tonight. Again, we have all of our contact information here. We would love to start conversations with each and every one of you.